Well, good morning, Cascades. You are the faithful who traversed the weather and made it here. We're glad to have you, and we're glad to have all of you online as well. So this morning we are continuing our series in the gifts of the Spirit, and we're going to be talking about evangelism today. And so I want to invite Mike Bronson to come on up. Mike served as a missionary when I first met Mike. I was brand new here to the church, and they were back from China visiting, and Josh and they took us out to lunch, and I was kind of nervous to admit that, I didn't know all of our missionaries. I felt like as a pastor I should know everyone, and so as I was getting to know them and talking to them, one of the things that stuck out to me as just a really cool thing and a surprise was they were a supported missionary by us in the sense that we were a congregation committed to praying for them and hearing from them, but they were using their own funds, their own retirement fund and pension and whatnot to pay for all of their expenses going to China and being a light and a witness. And they have made an impact on my life when it comes to the idea of how do you reach out to people, how do you truly evangelize. And so it's just a very natural thing to invite Mike to share with you some of their experiences and encourage you in some effective ways to reach people for Jesus. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Hi. Can you guess what the message is on today? Yeah. As he said, we were in China. Excuse me. We were in China for 10 years, and I'm going to have to drink some of this right here real quick. I guess I gave it my all on the first service because my throat right now is clogged up. Anyhow, we were in China, and because it's a communist country, we had to be extremely careful about talking about religious things. And the communist government, they would monitor all phone activities, communications on the social media and your computers. And if you said anything about religion, you can get into a lot of trouble, and some people have actually gone to prison. And recently, they passed a new law that said about 3 months ago that parents can no longer teach their children about God or Jesus. Things are changing quite a bit in China now. So when we would communicate with each other, we would not use religious words. We use code words. For example, instead of the word Christian, we would talk about friend of the Creator. But it didn't take very long for us to realize that phrase perfectly summarized our faith in Jesus. True Christianity is not a religion. It's a relationship with the Creator of the universe. So when you're talking to somebody about God, you're not trying to recruit them into your religion. Basically what you're doing is you're introducing them to your best friend. And that's what you really want to do. Now, if you give permission to God, and most Christians don't do it, but if you give permission to God to start changing your life dramatically on the inside, you naturally become happier. You have peace in the middle of the storm. You have stability when the world seems to be crumbling around you. And so true witnessing is basically sharing your happiness with Jesus with other people. It's actually very simple and straightforward, but because people view witnessing as something different, they're afraid of it. And there are three main reasons why they're afraid. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to start the conversation. And then third, they're shy and introverted. And when I was young, I used to be extremely shy and introverted. And I talked to Mike and Marcia Harrison because they knew my parents when I was young. But I would see the cool kids at school. They'd be walking down the hallway, and I look at them and I think, oh man, I wish I was like them. I wish I was cool, popular, and outgoing. But I wasn't. And I finally resigned myself to the fact that I will never be that way. And I accepted the fact that I'm not going to be that cool. Now, Terry Hicks, I went to high school with him. He was a cool kid. I was just a... No? Okay. Well, then years later, I began to help other people find happiness through Christ. And then I realized, I got to change dramatically if I wanted to reach a large number of people. So I started to focus on my comfort zone. That's that little box that we have here. And as long as we're inside this little box, we can feel comfortable, safe. But If we go outside of that box, then it's really bad. So I wrote down everything that made me feel uncomfortable, and I systematically started to do them one after another. For example, if I was afraid of going to a party by myself, I would do it over and over until I felt comfortable. See how I did that? Now, there are 6 main ways of sharing your faith, and since I've been witnessing for, over 5 decades, and I've done all these forms of witnessing, and I've been successful with them, but I found that some forms are not as effective as other forms. So I'm going to try to teach you a little bit about what I've learned, and then you can tailor this to your style of witnessing, because my style may not be at all your style. So the first form is passing out tracts, and that's really simple. You just go up to a person and say, here, and they read it, and it talks about God. The problem with that approach is that the person does not see firsthand a life that's been dramatically changed by God. And I found that that is where the true power of witnessing is at, is when people see a life that's changed. Nevertheless, a lot of people have been saved through it. Hudson Taylor, Thomas Johann Bach, they were both very successful missionaries. They both were featured in stories of great Christians, and they both were saved through tracts. Commander Mitsusu Fuchida, he was the leader of the first wave of the attack on Pearl Harbor. And he was also the one that transmitted the infamous message, Torah, 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 which basically meant our surprise attack was truly a surprise. And years later, someone passed a tract to him while he was walking down the street in Japan. He read it, and then he read the Bible, and then he became a Christian, and then he became an evangelist. So tracts are effective, but just understand the limitations of it. The next one is door-to-door witnessing, and that's basically you go to someone's house and talk to them about God. I've done that a lot when I was young. When I was 18 years old, I was on Robinson Road with a friend, and we went door to door. This woman invited us in the house, and you can tell God had been working in her life because she was asking a lot of really important questions. And then about 20 minutes later, she asked how she can become a Christian. And so when we told her, you could see the guilt and pain lift off her shoulders, and she started to cry, and she was bawling uncontrollably. And then at that time, her husband calls. He heard her crying, and he says, well, dear, what's wrong? And she says, well, there's 2 men here, and that's all she got out. And he says, I'm coming home right now, and boom. And she says, you guys got to get out of here. So very calmly and very gracefully, we left her house. The third approach is called the cold turkey witnessing, and that's where you go up to a total stranger and talk to them. And again, that's also very scary. But the limitation of that is that most people are very naturally suspicious and defensive. You think about it. If someone came up to you with a big old smile and you don't know them, they're a total stranger, and they say, hi, how you doing? Yeah. Now, in his mind, he's thinking, okay, what's he want? What's he trying to sell me? And even though he may act like he's listening to me, in reality, he's probably doing that. Not always. Maybe he's a nice guy and he's actually listening. But you have to understand that just saying the words does not mean that the people are truly hearing what you're saying. Now, who remembers the Rainbow Man from the 1980s? John did, I know that. Anybody else? Okay, he went to every major ball game, and this is baseball, football, all the ball games, year after year. He put on his rainbow wig with a Bible verse on his shirt or the name of Jesus, and he would do incredibly stupid and weird and just outlandish things to get the attention of the camera, because his desire and his goal was to get the name of Jesus Christ plastered over the TV set for millions of people to see. And to him, that was his form of witnessing. And he felt that the way in which you deliver a message, your method is not important. It does not interfere with the message itself, because the Bible talks about God's word will not return void. Now, I don't agree with his approach on that. I'm not saying he was wrong. I'm just saying that I would never do that because I don't think it's effective that way. Because you remember Jesus talked about the seeds falling on hard ground and how that does not return results. But here are a few examples of why I don't agree with that approach. If this guy robbed you, would you be inspired to read John 3:16 later that night? No. If you saw this guy, would you think that God is a God of love? Or this guy here, would you think that God is going to give you peace and tranquility? No. If you saw this van, and he's driving rudely and erratically, would that draw people toward God or would that push people away from God? Would you want to go to this barber shop? Boris Johnson would. This probably is his barber shop. And would you want to invest your money in this place here? Words are important and they're powerful, but actions in your life is far more important and powerful. And that's why I want to emphasize today about friendship evangelism. The next two approaches are the most powerful and the most productive, in my opinion. And again, I'm not saying other ways are wrong. I'm just saying what worked good for me and worked for us well in China is friendship evangelism. Godly influence is basically when you give permission to God to completely, dramatically change your life, and then when your life is changed, he then pours his power into your life, and that just naturally draws people to God through your life. And it's like that, the moth in the flame. The moth just wants to go to that flame. It just can't help it. And so now I'm going to give you an example of a godly life, and it's that girl right down there. I'm not going to point to her. I'm not going to make people look at her. But Janet was a superhero in China. Even before she went to China, she was dynamic. But in China, she really shone. Because in China, you had to be very careful about using words, godly words. So your life had to be the powerful message. And she helped a lot of people in many ways. She helped the poor people. She helped a very, very, very poor school in a lot of ways. And if you got my newsletter, you would know some of the things that she did over there. I went to the school with her the first time she went, and I did zero there. She did a lot of things there, but I just stood there, and my only job was to stand there and look handsome. Yeah, give me an amen if you think I did a good job at that. Okay. So Janet got recognized over and over and over and over again, and even more times than this. And I don't have time to explain why she was recognized, but everyone in China, or everyone in her realm in China, realized that her life was different. And they realized that she, in spiritual ways, but also just non-spiritual ways, she was powerful. So, in China, it is literally against the law to talk about God to someone under 18 years old. It's in the Chinese Constitution, and you can go to prison for that. So she could not talk to her high school students about that. And they even passed a new law about 4 months ago that said that parents cannot talk to their children about Jesus anymore. China's changing quite a bit now. So she couldn't talk to the students, and she had to be very careful about talking to her co-workers. So if the coworker asked her questions about God, she could talk to them, but that's it. So what she did is that she got involved in their lives. She invited all the staff over to our apartment to learn how to cook desserts for Christmas, Thanksgiving, and she also had them come over other times to learn Western foods and other desserts. And it wasn't just Chinese people, it was foreigners from all over the world that she had over. She got involved in school activities, doing many different things. She invited coworkers over with their mates for dinner. She just got involved in a lot of different things. A lot of the staff said the same thing, that they had never, ever seen someone who was so radically different than Janet. Her life was so different. They knew she was a Christian, and they thought that maybe that had something to do with her being different. So there was another Christian that they went to, and they says, why is Janet so different? And the person said, she gave permission for God to change her life, And as a result, her life was changed, and then her actions were changed. And a lot of them says, that's exactly what I've been looking for, and that's what I want. And a lot of them became Christians because of her, and of course the other person. But it's important to understand that it's her life that made the difference. And when you go into a closed country, your life is the only message you really have at first. So in the future, there's going to be a lot of Chinese in heaven because of Janet and this other person. Now, 5 years before we went to China, we met a couple at a Chinese restaurant. It was some workers. And we invited them over to our house. And then later, we invited them over every week. And that lasted almost 2 years. And we talked to them about God, but we always focused on what God did for us. We focused on how we were sinners. He saved us. How he was a substitute and replacement for us. How he changed our life. Now, we could have said, you're a sinner. You're going to go to hell. You need to repent. I mean, that's okay, but I found that the most powerful way is to talk about how God had helped me, because then it's not confrontational, and they listen more, because people are often defensive when you start pointing at them. So about 4 or 5 months after they started coming to our house, the girl said that she went to church. And I says, really? She goes, yeah. She says, I saw something in you and Janet that was completely different. I'd never seen any other American that was like you or anybody in China, except for one other person. That was her English or ESL teacher. And she said that you both went to church, and so she thought that maybe that was the reason why we were, different. So she asked her teacher to take her to church, and after about 4 or 5 months, she became a Christian. And then while we were in China, at least one of the daughters became a believer also. And so just get involved in people's lives is a powerful way of reaching them. Basically, she said, I saw something in you, and I want it. And that, my friend, is gospel influence or godly influence in a nutshell. That's very simple and straightforward. Now, when I was 17, I worked at a nursing home washing dishes, and one of my coworkers was a witch, and she was a real live witch. I mean, it's the only time I ever worked with a real witch, but she didn't look like this. She looked normal. Well, normal is a relative term, right? After about a year, she said, Mike, I've been watching you for a while, and I noticed that you're different, and I couldn't figure out why, but whatever it is, I want it. And it was neat watching her grow from a witch to a very strong, mature Christian. And this has happened to me almost 15 times, not the witch part, but the people coming to me and saying, Mike, there's something different about you. And again, Janet has had that too. Your life should create change. And if your life does not create change, ask God to change you so that you can then help change other people. Words are important, of course. They're this powerful and important, but your life and your actions are this important. Now, you probably heard the phrase, I'm sorry, I can't hear what you're saying because your actions are speaking louder than your words. And that's a problem with a lot of people. Their actions are not consistent with their words. Your life should create a thirst and hunger in people's lives. And if it doesn't, again, ask God to change you on the inside so that your life does create that change. Clyde was, before he became an evangelist, he used to deliver bread at night to the grocery stores. And about 2 or 3 times a year, the manager or his boss would ride with them trying to increase sales. He would go to the different grocery stores and talk to the night manager and say, you should buy more of our bread. And that meant he got home about 2 or 3 hours later than normal. Well, one time it was his turn, and instead of one night, it was 3 weeks straight. And he's going, oh, man. But then he slammed his hand in the door of his truck. But he didn't swear, and he didn't complain about it afterwards. How we always complain about, I don't know. He didn't do that, and later that day, the boss said, the reason I've been riding with you for 3 weeks is because everyone said that your life was different. Everyone said that because you became a Christian, you changed. Well, I don't believe that religion can make that kind of change, so I decided to ride with you and see firsthand if you really were different. And then I saw you slam your hand in that door, and I realized you were different, and I want it. And he became a Christian. Sarah was not a Christian. Her mother was, and they lived on opposite sides of the country. And Sarah said, she called mom and said, hey, guess what? I got a conference on your side of the world. I have a couple hours free on Wednesday night. Can we get together? And her mom says, yeah, that's great. But as you know, Wednesday night is my church night. I go to church. And so you're welcome to come to church with me. And Sarah says, come on, Mom. I haven't seen you for a long time. I just want some one-on-one time with you. And her mom says, well, my religion is the most important thing in my life, and it takes priority over everything else. And the mom was thinking that the daughter will see how dedicated she was to God, and her daughter would wonder, why is God so important? And she would investigate it and then go, oh, I want that too. But in reality, she was pushing her daughter further away from God. Being godly is not the same as being religious. Commitment to a religion is not the same as being committed to God. Those are two different things. And you probably heard the phrase, oh man, you're so heavenly minded, you're of no earthly good. And I've seen a lot of people like that, and you probably too. They talk about God all the time, they're very religious, they do a lot of activities, but they never allowed God to change them on the inside. And because of that, they see the void, they see the absence of that, so they try to make up for it by being very religious on the outside. Well, don't do that. You need to be changed on the inside, and that's where the power of friendship evangelism comes in. A lot of people think that talking about God all the time and being active in religious activities is what's going to bring people to God. And I'm not saying those things are not important. They are important. But what's really important, the thing that really has the power, is a life that's been touched by God. When you have a life touched by God, that just draws, well, again, the moth to the flame. There was a boy, he was a college student. He went to church for the very first time, and he was late, and the service had already started, and he walks in, and all the seats were filled up. So he walked in, came to the front there, and sat down right in the aisle. And he had long, scraggly hair. He had dirty clothes, jeans with tears in it and stuff. And this was about 60 or 70 years ago, long before it became acceptable to dress like that at church. I remember one time I went to church, a friend's church, and I had tennis shoes on. They were expensive ones, but the guy at the door says, "You're not wearing those to church, are you?" I go, "Apparently I am." But, so the head elder got up, and he walked over to the boy, and everyone in the church knew what was going to happen next. They knew that the elder was going to have to talk to this kid. There are certain rules you must follow in church, and this boy obviously didn't know the rules, so he's going to be corrected. The elder got up to him, bent over, whispered to the boy, and then he sat down right next to the boy. He did not want the boy to be by himself on his first time at church. Now that's true love in action. And how many of us would do the same thing? Most of us would look down and say, well, the way he's dressed, he should dress better than that. Now, your life should be different. Now, it's easy to be different when the person you're talking to is bitter, angry, and unhappy. That's easy to be different from that. But what if the person is happy but still not a believer? Your life still should be different. Your life should still be the catalyst for change. What you need to be is that red duck. Well, you don't have to be a red duck, but you do have to be different. So, you might wonder, okay, what is friendship evangelism? We talked about godly influence. We talked about how you reach people in your immediate circle of friends. And so if your circle of friends is small, your godly influence only reaches those people. Do I hear an amen for that? Friendship evangelism is the same as godly influence, but it's with a larger circle of friends. So if your circle of friends is this big, and you use friendship evangelism, your circle of influence becomes larger. Friendship evangelism is the same as godly influence, but it's much higher. You reach new heights. For example, this balloon is low to the ground, and because of that, not many people can see the balloon. Likewise, your godly influence is limited to just those who are around you. But with friendship evangelism, Like this balloon is a lot higher, so a lot more people can see it. And likewise with friendship evangelism, your godly influence, because it's still godly influence, reaches a lot more people. Friendship evangelism is the same as godly influence, but it's on steroids. It's just got a lot more power. And incidentally, that's a real photograph of me when I was 38 years old. Maybe not. So you might wonder, okay, how do I do friendship evangelism? Well, it is the easiest and most powerful approach for witnessing. This is the reason why I like it. And the nice thing about it, it's not scary. You don't have to have advanced training to do this type of witnessing. You just learn how to be a friend. So your goal is to just start a conversation. Just be friendly. I mean, we can all do that. And then let it take you wherever it leads you. Now, you might wonder, okay, how do I start conversations? Here's a few ideas. Help somebody. If you see someone who needs help, help them. Janet and I were walking with some Chinese people. Janet was with one person, and they were walking about 20 feet in front of us, and I was walking behind. And as we're walking, I saw this guy trying to put some really heavy thing into a dumpster, and he just couldn't do it because it was like a couch type of thing. And so while we're walking and talking, I kind of veered off to the side, and then I just picked it up and helped him put it in, and then we just kept on walking. We didn't stop and talk or anything. And the person I was with looked at me and thought, she said, she was dumbfounded, whatever the word is. She was surprised. But those kind of things lead to other conversations. Just be helpful. Another one is make a comment. And I do this all the time, and sometimes it might drive my wife nuts, but if I see a guy with a leg like this, I would go, man, what on earth did you do? And sometimes that leads to something. Sometimes it doesn't. When we were in China, we were just there for 2 months, and we were still really green behind the ears. And we were at a Chinese restaurant, and while we were eating, this cat walks in. And remember, this is a Chinese restaurant. And you know the stereotypes about cats and dogs, and most of it's stereotypes, except for the very south part of China. And I made a comment to Janet. I said, that cat needs to be careful because if it's not, he's going to become part of tomorrow's menu. And the two girls on the table next to us started to laugh, and so we started talking to them. We talked for a long time. And the girl on this side over here, we became friends with her. And for the whole 10 years there and afterwards, we were friends and constantly communicated. 8 years after we met, she became a Christian. That one comment about the cat led to events that eventually led to her becoming a Christian. You never know. Take an interest, and this part is probably the most powerful way for you to reach other people. When you're at a restaurant and you see your server coming towards you, look and see the name tag before they get there. And then, when the person gets there, you say, hey, hi, Sarah. That shows that you actually are interested in that person compared to all the other customers. And when we were in China, or when we got back from China, we started to take a lot of cruises. And Janet was, she was always doing that. When someone came to the table, she'd look at their name and always call them by her name. You know, Mark, we need some more bread. Alex, we need the dessert menu, stuff like that. And Janet, if you want to learn about godly influence, you want to learn about how you can change lives, if you want to learn about how to be someone who just naturally draws people to Christ, you got to get to know that girl. Because she's different. I mean, she is very different. And I mentioned in the first service that, she's going to probably kill me for saying that because she's very busy. She keeps herself busy. This past week, we were visiting her parents, and she was helping a lot and doing things that most people would not do. That's just her personality. But if I do die unexpectedly today and the police say it was natural causes, don't believe it. No. I saw this girl at a fast food restaurant. She's a worker, and I saw this tattoo on her hand. And her arm, and I asked her what it meant or what was it. She goes, oh, it's a butterfly with a semicolon under it. And I said, what's that? And she goes, well, it means rape or rape recovery. She had been raped several times by her brothers, and then she was gang raped about 5 years later. And the butterfly represents a new life, a new beginning for her. And so, unfortunately, I have not had a chance to follow up on this conversation. I'd like to try to do that if I can. But I have been praying for her almost every night, and I would appreciate it if you guys, just one time at least, during this next week, pray for her salvation. Just call her Butterfly Girl, and just ask God to make a change in her life and bring somebody into her life. Be a friend of the friendless. If you see someone sitting at a table who's lonely, go over there and talk to them. Love the loveless. You remember, that life could have been your life. You could have been born in a completely different situation. There was an Indian in the jungles of Brazil that said to the missionary, you build a bridge of love from my heart to your heart, and then Jesus walked across. You notice that Jesus is misspelled, and that's because AI refused to allow me to use the word Jesus in any of the photographs I was creating. I was told that later on they changed that, maybe people complained, but it shows how biased our technology industry is now. Make sure your friendship is genuine, and that's the important thing. People will see it when you're fake. They will see that you're trying to fake being a friend because you're trying to do something. You're trying to get credit for getting, I want you saved. But you heard the folklore of the gunfighters who put a notch in their gun, and that would signify the number of people they killed. Well, Christians sometimes do it too. They put a notch in their Bible, and that would signify the number of people that they led to Christ. Now, they would not literally put a notch in their Bible, but what they would do is they would brag about it. It was a status for them. Yeah, I led 15 people to the Lord this past 2 years. Yeah, pretty good. Or to them, it's a conquest. They're trying to earn points with God or trying to get rewards. That should not be your motivation about talking to people. You should talk to them because you truly care about them. I mean, that's just important. Take my word for it. Show a true interest in their life. Now, with me, once the conversation starts, I would allow them to do all the talking. And I would ask questions to direct the conversation, but again, they're doing the majority of the talking because your goal is to get them to do all the talking. And you do that because you want them to open up to you. People are desperate to have someone listen to them. There was a guy who was doing a master's degree thesis, and he was doing it on listening. And he put this advertisement in the paper, and it said, you do all the talking, I do all the listening, $50 a half hour. That was about 1960, so this is worth about $300 a half hour now. But he was surprised how many people responded to it. They didn't want advice. They didn't want counseling. They just wanted somebody to listen to them. And that is a powerful resource that you can tap into. And unfortunately, most Christians are not tapping into this resource. Think about it. You got thousands of people around you who are looking for someone to listen to them, actually millions. And all you got to do is just start a conversation and listen. You'll be surprised how well this works. This is a powerful way to get to know people, and then when they start opening up to you, then you can start learning more about them. Unfortunately, most Christians are not good listeners, and unfortunately, most Christians try to dominate the conversation. Don't do that. Your goal is, number one, get them to open up because you want to learn more about them because that will help you in the future. Also, you want them to share their deep and dark pains. If you truly show you're interested, they will open up to you. Number two, you want them to ask you for advice, but do not give them advice until they ask for it. Jesus talked about planting the seeds on hard ground. You can't plant seeds until the ground is ready. You need to start digging up that stuff in their life to get them ready for it. And number three, you want to earn the right to be heard. And you earn this right by listening and listening and listening. If you don't earn the right, they will listen to you this much. But if you do listen to them, they will listen to you this much. They really, once you show that you are interested, they want to know what you have to say. Now, I've had a lot of people say the same thing to me. They say, Mike, I can't understand it. I've only known you for an hour, but I have told you things that I've never told anyone else before, ever. And that was just in 1 hour. And why? I listened. That's a secret weapon, is listening. Now, we mentioned we were in China for 10 years, and we did not go with a missionary group. We did not get supported. We paid for it ourselves out of our pensions and private savings. And, as you can see, I'm head and shoulders above the college students there. I was a lot taller. We did in China what we have been doing in America already. In America, we've been using godly influence to let our life bring people to Christ. When we went to China, we did the same thing. We didn't go there to plant churches or to do evangelism. We just let people see our life, just like Janet did, and then people responded. It worked really well in China. We were just two normal people living in a foreign land. We were not special. We're not, somebody who's cut out for this kind of work. We just decided that we wanted to go someplace because we knew we could have been born someplace else and we would want someone else to help us instead. So now our desire is to let other people see what we did and then get challenged to do the same thing. If you're retired already, consider the possibility of going to a foreign country for 1 or 2 years. Do not go with a missionary group. I'm not saying going with a group is bad or anything, but not for what you want to do here. And do not raise support. Use your pension to pay for it. Raising support takes 2, 3, 4 years to get the support. Use your pension and pay for it that way. All you're doing, you're not planting churches, you're not doing evangelism, you're just living a godly life, and people will be naturally drawn to God to you. Now, if you're not retired, still consider going to a foreign country for 1 or 2 years and get a job there to support yourself. If you can't find a job in your field, maybe consider teaching English over there. Most countries now require the students to learn English because it's the international trade language. So you can get a job at a school or a university. Now, some countries, like China, now require you to have a teaching certificate, but other countries don't. But if you do have a country that requires it, you can still teach English on the side. In China, the teachers at the university were getting $45 an hour to teach English, and they taught with a Chinese accent. Just think how much a real American could have got paid, who talked with a perfect American accent. So you can do that as a way of living in that foreign country. Common mistakes that people make is that, they interrupt. Don't interrupt. Even if you are ready to give advice, until they ask you for advice, don't give it. Let them ask you. Remember, you can't plant a seed until the ground is ready. Another major mistake, and this is a big one, is that when you start listening to them, they will open the door a little bit and ask you for a little bit of advice. Instead of giving them a little bit of advice, most Christians do this. They kick that door wide open. They come in with both guns blazing away. Don't do that because the ground is not ready for that yet. So what I do is I will tell them only enough to make them hungry for more. I tell them a little bit and then I pull back. I tell them, if they ask for more, I tell them more and then I pull back. I found that if they ask for more, they're listening. If they don't ask for more, you don't really know if they're listening. Now, what I want you to do is take your cell phone out because in about a minute, you're going to take a picture of something. So go ahead and get your cell phones out. When Chris asked me to make this message, I spent a lot of time preparing this thing. And I decided to put it into writing. So the written version of this has twice as much information on it. Then I also decided to make a sequel to it called Presenting the Gospel in a Simplified Way. If you don't know how to present the gospel to someone, read this one because it will show you in a very simple way how to talk to others about God. And then the one on prayer evangelism, That's just fun. So you can read that one for a different reason. So now take a picture of this. This is Janet's and my website. Go to, follow the instructions. It'll tell you how to download these articles. And then go to the menu and go to the bio page, and it will have a lot of photographs of Janet and me in China, and it'll give you a chance to learn more about Janet and me. Thank you very much.